You're listening to Beyond the Couch podcast with Dr. Sally Nazari, where we look at you beyond the couch and build ways to enrich your life, share your triumphs, achieve your goals, and most importantly, where we'll be celebrating you. Let's get started. Welcome to Beyond the Couch, episode 5, everyone. I'm your host, licensed psychologist and Reiki master teacher, Dr. Sally Nazari, and I'm really looking forward to talking today about mindfulness. Now, mindfulness has become a buzzword that's gotten a lot of attention over the last few years, but not many people really get a full understanding of what it is. The thing is that sometimes when something becomes popular, it's a positive thing because there's a lot more awareness. But the downside is that much of the information then becomes watered down and important pieces of it can be overlooked. Because of this, many people have an incomplete and partial understanding of mindfulness. My goal today is to go through the science behind how and why mindfulness works for us. In particular, the way mindfulness can impact us and help us work through the various disruptions and stressors in our lives can really bring a deeper level of benefit, growth, and enduring change as we redefine and recreate our lives. With things changing in our lives, even when that change is within ourselves, we might be feeling a bit restless and stuck in a rut. You might be finding yourself feeling a bit overwhelmed and run down. In fact, you might even feel this in your physical body, where you may be having a hard time catching your breath and feel your muscles tightened and clenched. Maybe you're feeling rushed from one thing to the next without a moment to slow your racing mind down. Next thing you know, you've walked into the room and don't even know why, or you're looking for your cup of coffee and it's been in your hand the whole time you're looking for it. You may have even had an entire conversation with someone and realized that you have no idea what you just talked about. It may be that things have become so frazzling that more and more you're becoming reactive without knowing what set you off, and you're just having a hard time focusing on what you're trying to do. You wish you could find a way to just clear your head, de-stress, refocus, and find your footing again. With a brief and consistent mindfulness practice, you can find simple ways to get yourself feeling more focused, alert, and calm again to get into a productive and meaningful mindset so you can tackle all of the things you're juggling from a state that can help you make the best choices for your life. So let's take a look at what mindfulness actually is. Mindfulness refers to a practice that focuses on awareness of the present experience without judgment and without attachment or reactivity. This allows our mind to be calm and peaceful so we can have greater clarity and even increased happiness, peace, and lower discomfort. See, it's often difficult for most people to control their mindset, often feeling as if our thoughts are maintained by external circumstances. As we build our mindfulness practice, we can more easily maintain awareness and control of our thoughts and mindset. Let's look at how this works. I'll give you a hint. It all begins with our brain and something called neuroplasticity. This practice, in other words, changes the structure of our brain in ways that are positive for us. Generally, our brain is looking to proactively solve future problems and rework past issues so that when they come up again, it's prepared. This keeps us from being fully immersed in the present moment. Our mind does not see a distinction between a past, future, or present stressor. It gets us to react to past and future stressors with stress in the here and now. To our mind, it's the same. So, overthinking, worrying, depressive thoughts, and anxiety elicit the stress response, Or, as you might remember from our Understanding Disruptions discussion in episode 1, the fight, flight, and freeze response. Over time, this can make us vulnerable to mental health issues. Mindfulness has been shown to reduce the size of the amygdala, or the seat of the brain where fear and negative emotions reside. I'll talk more about this in just a few minutes, but for the moment, it's important to remember this also helps reduce the stress hormones such as cortisol and adrenaline. Overall, shifting our state in this way helps us to respond in more productive ways to the things going on in our lives. That on its own also has a cumulative effect. First, it continues creating and building more positive and adaptive neuronal connections, which I'll discuss, while simultaneously dissolving the older, less helpful neuronal connections. It also allows us to participate in our lives in ways that allow us to build confidence, self-efficacy, and more meaningful relationships, each of which I'll discuss in future episodes. Modern scientists began studying the brains of people who regularly meditated about 60 years ago. They noticed that these people could weather stressful events with more resilience, come up with more original and creative ideas, and improve cognitive functions like memory. In the last 10 years, we've come to find out that every time we think, feel, or act, a neuronal connection occurs in our brain. Things that we think, feel, or do most often strengthen these connections and pathways, or ways that neurons communicate with each other. In the same vein, those connections that we don't use become weakened and begin to fall away. We can notice this with our habits that have become automatic and often mindless. Our thoughts and thought patterns work in the same way. Worry thoughts, angry thoughts, guilt, shame, even sadness can all become habitual and strengthen the neuronal connections that forge them. It then becomes much easier to go there, and more readily too. Because these connections have become so strong, habitual, and repetitive, it often feels like we're powerless to change them. I can tell you that this is a myth. We just need to understand how we can change our brains and these neuronal connections. This is where neuroplasticity is important. Neuroplasticity refers to the idea that our brain is, in many ways, like plastic and moldable. Things we find difficult now become easier the more we do it. Restructuring our brain through mindfulness happens through the practice of noticing our thoughts, feelings, and sensations, and bringing our awareness back to the present experience of these things rather than getting caught up in them. As we do this, we begin to both create and strengthen new neuronal pathways and weaken previous maladaptive ones that were not helpful for us. In recent studies, scientists look to see how, over 3 months of mindfulness practice, can change the brain structure of the people engaging in these practices. The findings indicated more gray matter in the regions of the brain responsible for working memory and executive decision making. The interesting thing is, typically, with age, there is a decline in these areas. But this was not so with those practicing mindfulness. This suggests that mindfulness slows down and prevents the natural age-related decline in cortical structure. A follow-up study looked to target whether these effects in the brain were in fact due to meditation instead of other potential factors. Scientists isolated these other factors to see what change did actually occur due to mindfulness. They saw increased size in the hippocampus, which aids in managing emotions, learning, and memory. In fact, we see a decrease in this area among people with PTSD and depression. Scientists also noticed changes in the area of the brain that contributes to perspective taking, empathy, and compassion. It makes sense that this area, the temporoparietal junction, is impacted since one of the documented benefits of mindfulness has been improvements in relationships. The amygdala, which we mentioned a few minutes ago, our brain center for fight or flight, also showed significant changes following mindfulness. During and after stressful, overwhelming, scary, and traumatic situations, the amygdala tends to increase naturally in size. This prepares us for survival in whatever way is possible, as you might recall from our Understanding Disruptions episode. However, in these studies, scientists saw the amygdala shrinking. In fact, the greater the stress reduction they noted, the smaller the amygdala became. This is the cumulative impact of mindfulness. It's important to mention that the changes noticed in these studies were documented to be independent of any other factors in the environment or personal characteristics of participants. They also show that mindfulness does more than just help us feel good in the moment, or is more than a placebo response. Mindfulness does literally change our brain. With that, it allows us to change our lives and ourselves in our lives. Looking at these neurobiological changes, we can understand the physiology of how this works to contribute to helping depression, anxiety, reducing stress, decreasing pain, increasing concentration, enhancing energy, and even things like helping with our relationships, growing creativity, and in the more immediate benefits, over time it becomes easier to practice mindfulness as it gets easier to bring our minds back and prolong the time between our mind wandering, and it gets easier to accept the fact that our mind wanders. One reason I offer the Mindfulness Matters Challenge to the community is because I think everyone can benefit from improving their quality of life through this practice. I'll be offering the challenge again in June, and you can read more about it in the show notes. From our discussion today, we can see there are a number of benefits from mindfulness, a practice that helps us to better structure the 50 to 70,000 thoughts we have each day, can help us revamp what we're looking to build in our lives. In fact, each of the graduates of my Mindful Monday group, which I've also included in the show notes, has shared powerful life changes during and after the group. I hope you've learned a lot about this tool today. I look forward to sharing more about mindfulness in the next episode, where we'll talk about how to bring this practice into our life. Take care.
Thanks for listening to Beyond the Couch Podcast, a space for celebrating you. The contents of this episode are for informational and supplemental purposes only, and not a substitute for professional services. For more access to you beyond the couch, check out www.drsallynazari.com.